It's a privilege to work with our future K-12 science teachers. And as a teacher educator and as a researcher, I think carefully about how we prepare teachers to engage learners in the practices of science and engineering. And there is a really beautiful overlap with that work and the work of Empatico. Empatico fosters things like critical thinking and clearly communicating and collaborating in a group and being curious. And those are also the characteristics of great scientists. And so it's really wonderful to be in this place with my Empatico colleagues and the teachers in our community, thinking about how do we foster these things in our students.
Hi, my name is Gabe Garcia, and I am the administrative assistant for Empatico. And I am new to this role, but prior to joining the team, I actually worked in education in Chicago for 10 plus years, most recently at the School of the Art, at the Chicago Theological Seminary, and prior to that, the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And I am excited to be part of the team and looking forward to the conversation today.
I'll go ahead and start with this as we're kind of looking. There was a slide on the front end of that we didn't have, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that just to kind of give a little bit of background of how Empatico came to be, and then Rocio will talk about this more with the research piece of it. But if you have ever had a kind bar, you are familiar, I guess, with the company that has started this with us. And so Daniel Lubetzky is also a Trinity grad, but he granted us some funds to start really working with his project. And his company reflects what he values, which is kindness. And the idea of Empatico is bringing kindness to our K-12 system and to bringing it into our schools and working with our students. So it's designed to help students build humanity across their differences. It takes kids out of their own classroom so that they can actually visit and work with students in other classrooms across the country, across the world, and have access to these people that they otherwise wouldn't meet, and to build some understanding and to build some kindness across the world. So it actually uses a virtual platform, which we're all using quite a bit now. So that's really handy. And it really expands the boundaries of how students in our schools are able to meet and build relationships across the world. So he's working on, a goal of building humanity, and it works really well with what we're doing in our Department of Education, as one of our goals is to see how educators use this and how we can best support educators as they use this. So I apologize if there's a lot of noise behind me. I'm next to some construction, but hopefully you can hear me okay. But when we look at what is Empatico, you'll hear us talking about it for the next couple minutes. But it's a free tool for teachers. And what it does is it allows them to connect their classroom with other classrooms, not only around the country, but around the world. And so it does this through a combination of tools. They have live videos, they have activities, and all of which are designed to really foster meaningful connections among students. So it's not just like, hey, let's get online and have a conversation, but it's really based on research that allows the students to make strong, meaningful connections with these interactions that they're having. So they interact with peers from other countries or other parts of the US, and as they're doing this, it helps students interrupt biases that they may have, and it also can help reinforce assumptions that they have. And so it's a very important tool that teachers are finding that they can use with their students in so many different ways to build compassion. It offers time-efficient resources for teachers, and they can schedule virtual exchanges that work in time with their own curriculum and with their own timing of schedules, so that it's not just an add-on, it's something that actually is deeply embedded into what they're teaching in their elementary classrooms. And so there's a lot more research that's going into what students are learning from this. And on our end, Dr. Delgado is going to talk more about what we're learning as far as how the teachers are using and what they're getting from Empatico. So I want to talk a little bit about the skills, and I will keep this pretty brief, but really it is designed to help students build 4 specific skills that they'll be looking at. And Ellen mentioned this a little bit in her introduction. These are good skills, not just for learning empathy and common humanity, but for science and, for life. These are all skills that are are critically important, and they're all deeply embedded into the Empatico curriculum and activities that are used. So the first one is really perspective taking, and this can be really difficult for young children to understand that other people have different thoughts and feelings and maybe knowledge than you do. And so it really works with perspective taking of, how might other people see things that are happening around them. Also, understanding influences. It helps students really kind of look at the idea that someone has circumstances or past experiences, beliefs, cultures that they grew up in, and all of these influence their perceptions and their feelings that they have. And so even though somebody may believe something or view something different than you do, there's often a reason behind someone's actions that we cannot see. And so it helps young children understand the fact that there are other influences that we should be aware of, and we should be asking, and we should be curious about. The third skill is relating to another person's perspective to try and see the world through their eyes. It teaches students to ask kind of like, what is life like for that person where they are? What might be influencing how they perceive this situation or how they see this situation? How can I relate to their experience so that I can start to understand how they feel? So all of that kind of goes into that perspective taking piece of it. The second big skill that they look at is respectful communication. And the sub-skills in that, lifelong adult skills that we need to all be using, but actively listening to a speaker, taking turns when you speak, and respond in a respectful and a positive manner when you're having interactions and discussions and exchanges with other people. Third skill is critical thinking. And I really love that this focuses on being able to think for yourself. So Empatico doesn't tell students how or what they should think, but really, how do you go about learning how to be a good thinker? And so you might recognize, that assumptions and opinions are not facts. That's important. They're personal interpretations. And so what might be influencing those personal interpretations? Students are asked to learn, to look for all parts of the story, that they may only know one part of a story. And so when you're critically thinking about something, you're looking for what is the rest of the story that I might not be aware of. And then to investigate new explanations with an open and a very curious mind, that there's that reasoning behind it. And so it's okay to think the way I do, but how can I critically think about what's the rest of the story and go about gaining those critical thinking skills? And the last big skill that it focuses on is cooperation, which we all know is highly important throughout life, working together to achieve a common goal. What I love about the Empatico platform is that not only is it a common goal for a classroom, but you're working on a common goal with someone across the world, on the other side of the world, that you otherwise maybe not, wouldn't have ever had the opportunity to meet them. And so building that common humanity and those common goals, as well as contributing to the group goal, and then respecting one another's ideas. So as we talk more about the curriculum and what students are experiencing, keeping in mind that these are the 4 main critical skills that all of the lessons and interactions and activities have students focusing on as they go about these experiences.
Thank you, Courtney, for providing us with an overview of what the Empatico program is and the skills that Empatico hopes to develop in elementary-aged children. So how do we do Empatico? How do we share this important information with teachers? Empatico is a 3-year grant, and 2019-2020 was the first year. So prior to the beginning of the academic year, we contacted 4 school districts in San Antonio and engaged in conversations about which model of implementation they were most interested in using for Empatico. And you'll hear me use the word educators. I just want to be clear that educators encompasses classroom teachers, counselors, and social workers, because each of the school districts followed a different model. So in the fall of 2019, we held in-person training sessions with 137 educators who became familiarized with Empatico and created accounts for connecting their classrooms with other classrooms from across the nation and or the world. And these educators came from across 63 elementary campuses in 4 school districts. We work with East Central Independent School District and San Antonio ISD, and those 2 school districts followed a teacher model. In the Northside Independent School District, we followed a counselor model, and we also work with Edgewood Independent School District, and they followed a social worker model. So another training session was held in the early spring of 2020, and webinars were also developed and conducted to support educators in the implementation of the Empatico program. And then spring break came and COVID hit. And as we all very well know, schools didn't go back face to face, but the Empatico team continued to provide training sessions virtually. So there were 108 educators who were trained virtually. And in total, there were 245 educators, each of whom works with about 20 to 22 students, right? So that's approximately 5,000 school children who would be impacted by their teachers engaging in these Empatico exchanges. In addition to the training that we provided for educators, we also conducted a socio-emotional training for parents from the 4 participating school districts. And we held focus groups with educators who participated. So at the end of the school year, we had those focus groups with educators who completed 2 exchanges, 1 exchange, or who didn't get an opportunity to conduct an Empatico exchange. And some of the initial understandings that we're developing from the work that we have done this far are that educators appreciate the innovation, the purpose, the excitement that Empatico brings into their school communities. And both educators and students are excited about meeting students from other places from across the country and across the world. And there's that interest in connecting with other practitioners who have used Empatico so that we can all continue learning about how to implement it and the positive impact that it has. Whoops, sorry about that. And the impact that it has on children's socio-emotional learning. So we are starting year 2. And as we know, schools being done very differently this year. It's a very, very unique circumstances, but we're adding districts. So we've added 3 more districts. We're working with Somerset, Southside, and Southwest ISDs, and a private school that Dr. Haynes Smith, talked about earlier, a private school, the Winston School of San Antonio. And we are really looking forward to, how we're going to continue to share this important information with educators from throughout San Antonio. And year 3, again, we will continue to add districts and, share what we're learning about Empatico, the impact that it has in children, and, how we can continue to use it to connect children from across the world.
Thank you, Dr. Delgado. So Empatico intersected really well with an opportunity we had this summer to work with Compassion San Antonio. So on his first day in office in 2017, Mayor Nirenberg and the new city council signed the Compassion San Antonio resolution. And in doing so, they joined a global movement that's basically inspired by the golden rule, or what we call the ethics of reciprocity. And that calls on each person to treat others as well as the planet as they wish to be treated. All of this grew out of San Antonio's Peace Center, which was a grassroots initiative that began about 7 years earlier. So there are 5 goals of the Compassion San Antonio resolution. In the first, we partnered with the International Charter for Compassion. At that time, there was about a little more than 100 cities, but now there are more than 400. They wanted to bring this compassion education to everyone in San Antonio, and they wanted to do it through the institutions of education. So that's something that we'll get into a little bit more. They also wanted to develop collaborations and partnerships among various constituencies, from government to faith-based, nonprofit. And they wanted to celebrate the stories of compassion that we see throughout our city. So right now on the San Antonio Compassion website, there are more than 3,200 stories of people doing all kinds of compassionate acts. And it's really exciting to scroll through and just read that, especially when you just need something to be encouraged about. And then they wanted to partner with compassion cities globally. So to realize this goal, San Antonio chose to partner with Compassion Integrity Training through the Center for Compassion, Integrity, and Secular Ethics through Life University. So the Compassion Integrity Training, it teaches 3 skills. First of all, it's compassion for self, compassion for others, and then compassion within systems. The mayor's office was the first to complete the training in 2018. But this past summer is when the educators got on board, and they felt like, given the circumstances of everything that we've been through this past summer and the unrest and the pandemic, that this was just, the timing was just perfect for that. So this past summer in July, 85% of San Antonio educational institutions participated in 10 2-hour sessions, plus additional work that we did. At the end of this, 167 educators had completed this CIT training, and we all became the inaugural Compassion Institute Fellows. So this is a year-long effort. It wasn't just for 10 weeks this summer. And we get together, the fellows get together monthly in smaller cohorts and talk and discuss how we're going to integrate what we've learned in these compassionate practices into our educational systems. The next cohort is tentatively set for 2021, and they're currently thinking about whether that needs to be business leaders, healthcare leaders, or perhaps SAPD. So one of the things that I think they're most proud of is that San Antonio is the first of all of the 450 plus compassion cities around the world to integrate compassion training into all levels of the educational system. And that includes, we had educators from pre-K all the way through higher education in our group cohorts this summer that were learning these skills. And I'm happy to say that 100% of the universities in San Antonio had people participating in this. And now Ellen is going to tell us a little bit more about some specifics and dig a little deeper into what that experience looked like.
Thank you, Dr. Allen. It really was wonderful to participate in CIT training this summer. And we would just like to share a little bit of that experience with you this afternoon. So like Dr. Allen was sharing, each week we were meeting with educators and community partners from all over our city, as well as our facilitators from around the world. We met each week, 2 days each week, for 2 hours each time that we met. And each week we focused on a different compassion skill, like gratitude and how our lives and our work are all interconnected, and discernment. And before the meetings, we did reading And we had an accountability partner, and we met with that accountability partner over the phone or through, some platform. And we discussed, what we were reading about that compassion skill, how we were applying that in our own lives and in the work that we're doing in our community. And it was just a real sense of support and encouragement for us. And interestingly, the first skills that we focused on were skills of showing compassion for ourselves. It's really important to show compassion to ourselves before we can really think about how do we show compassion to others and to our larger community. And we talked about having a calm body and a calm mind, and the importance of having a resource that we can go back to even when things around us may be chaotic and feel, beyond our control or frustrating for whatever reason. And so I just invite you to experience a little bit of that with us this afternoon. We're going to do a breathing exercise that we did in CIT that I hope will be a valuable tool for you. I encourage you to just take a moment to think of a resource. It could be perhaps someone who you really care about and you enjoy being with. Or maybe it's a beautiful place that you really like being, that feels calm and comforting. So I'm just going to give you a moment to think of that place, that person, that event that you value. And with that resource in mind, just think of some details about being with that person or being in that place. And just take a deep breath and let it out. And with that breath, as you let that out, maybe today is a frustrating day for you and you're letting out some of that frustration. Maybe today is a wonderful day for you and you're breathing in some of that goodness. And you can see my eyes are already starting to drift. And I just invite you, if you feel comfortable and would like to close your eyes as well, or if you prefer to take a soft gaze in front of you. And we're just going to take some deep breaths together. We all breathe at a different rate. So I won't walk you through every breath, but we'll do about a minute or so here, maybe 10 breaths, just being in that place, imagining being with that person, and just breathing in and out. So for about a minute, I just invite you to just take some deep breaths. Settle into your space. Feel your body maybe being heavy and just being supported by the chair, your feet on the ground. In and out. ask you to maybe wiggle your fingers, flutter your eyes open, and I encourage you to think about how you feel. How does that feel to just take a break in the middle of whatever your day is and just breathe in and breathe out? And it's really been a helpful resource for me to return to this practice, especially in the midst of what for many of us feels like a really challenging time sometimes. And so we invite you to come back to this if you find that helpful in this day and in the coming weeks. Just come back to that and just take some deep breaths and show some compassion for yourself, a really important practice as we think about showing compassion to others as well. And so thank you for listening and being a part of that with me. And I'm going to pass on to my colleague and friend, Dr. Heather Haynes-Smith.
Thank you, Ellen. I have so much gratitude for those few minutes of practice. I was practicing some tracking, resourcing, and grounding that we learned in the CIT training. And I know we all here on the Empatico team have gratitude for those who are watching this today and in the future. My focus in today's webinar is sharing about the connections we're making between Empatico and CIT and some next steps that we're working on. So our team sees the connections and partnerships and opportunities from both CIT and Empatico and are really committed to exploring the opportunities and working together on just seeing how we can best support the educators, the teachers, the counselors, also the parents, and then our own higher ed students, our future teachers. As a team, we want to build on the development of our personal skills and compassion practices and consider how we can support teachers and students in K-12 through Empatico and how we can support our pre-service teachers again in cultivating these skills and practices in both our undergraduate and our graduate courses. So specifically related to CLT, you might be wondering what we're going to do. We're actually continuing to meet and explore partnerships and things happening in San Antonio and our practices. We're working with Mel and Sharon monthly, and we're really grateful for that continued time to bring it back and reflect purposefully throughout the year. Personally, I am representing our team and participating in a facilitator training for the CIT to understand it more, to continue my practice and deeper learning across the 3 domains that were introduced earlier but are shown in, I think, the graphic. Self-cultivation is the first big domain that's covered, then relating to others and engaging in systems. And this happens across 10 different skills. And I think if you're looking at the screen and you're thinking about what my colleagues said, you can already see how there is this natural overlap in terms of relationships and empathy and compassion. So we're going to continue thinking about this CIT curriculum and teachings as we begin year 2 of the grant with our educators and their students. And we just think it's so important for schools always, right, in social emotional learning, but especially now in San Antonio, given the pandemic. CIT and Empatico research and professional development is going to continue in Bexar County schools. It's so helpful that the whole team went through those trainings this summer alongside educators from, I think Laura said 85% of the schools, but all the higher education institutions, and all of us were having these conversations about how this can help us work together and build community. It also helps us with our language. So Empatico And those 4 skills: perspective taking, critical thinking, respectful communication, and collaboration. We share that language, but we also as a team now share the language of CIT, and we bring those practices to our team meetings, and they're helping us be purposeful about being purposeful with teachers and students. So as year 2 begins, one of our new initiatives is social media. So we obviously invite anyone to join us on any of those, and we'll show you those links or our handles in a minute. But we're going to use it to support our year 1 teachers. We're not going to just leave them there. We're going to continue to present them ideas and content to support remote learning and social emotional learning. We always say SEL, our acronym, and revisit those skills. I always need reminders. So revisit those skills to teach and lead with empathy and compassion. For participants in year 2, we're hoping that the social media can become a place to connect and share and provide resources and create community. So we can all reflect and participate in mindfulness and compassion practices. So with the grant, though, we continue to support the educators, but we're also collecting data on school-university partnerships, the systems and implementation. We're learning so much from these partnerships and their contributions to global teaching competencies and social emotional learning implementation, which can look varied and really is dependent on the context of the schools and the educators and the families and what they've asked for. So we're going to continue to introduce those skills, and I think it will heavily reflect our new knowledge from CIT. Empatico, though, from the very first slide, reminds us that this is a free tool for anyone. So while we're talking about what we're doing with Empatico, it's a free tool for any educator or family. They have family connections now that people could be doing, like pen pals, to develop those in your own home and talk about them. I think if people are interested in learning more or getting their school districts involved, we do have another year of the grant where we'll be partnering with schools on the research end, but the tools and the resources are there and available. And our contact information, I think it's up, is provided so that you can follow us or join us for inspiration and ideas. We have so much gratitude for you joining us today to learn about our individual and collective research interests and our growing knowledge about supporting all learners, whether they be children, their teachers, counselors, social workers, future teachers, and our colleagues in higher ed here in San Antonio and beyond. I think we're ready to entertain some questions. So thank you again for being with us today.
Thanks, Heather. We do have some questions. First question, do you all work with, or will they work, meaning you, with independent or private schools? Turn your mic. Yeah, thanks.
I don't know who wants to address it. I was just thinking about that. I think, yes, we will work with independent and private schools. I think there's probably some room even in year 2 to form some smaller district partnerships. And then also if they're thinking into the future, we would love to support teachers and provide professional development and introduce them to the tools and resources. Would anybody like to add to that?
I would just encourage you to contact us, and we will continue to, develop a plan for how to work with, whichever school you're at. If you're in a private school, public school, we're definitely wanting to reach out to as many educators as possible. So the short answer is yes, and contact us.
And our work really centers in Bexar County. So any school that is adjacent to or in or crosses, that's the focus of the funding for our work. But I think we're probably interested in supporting anybody anywhere too.
Another question, is Trinity the only university in San Antonio participating in Empatico?
Yes, Trinity received a grant from the Kind Foundation, so we are the only university. It's grant funded. CIT, we had universities from every university in San Antonio participated.
Excellent. Okay. Did you say that your group is actually communicating with children in other countries?
Yes, I'd love to jump in here. So I'm a newer member of the team, but it is exciting that our children in these classrooms can actually meet virtually children from another place in the US, but they can also choose to connect with another teacher in other parts of the world. And there are different activities that the teachers here and wherever else in the world can choose to have their children talk about. So it might be foods we love, what a great place to connect and share with each other. These are the foods that we enjoy here. These are the foods that we like here, ways we play. So there are a variety of different topics, and these teachers can help their children have conversations around that. And how those things look in their communities.
And here's, I guess, a part two to that question is, what countries have you communicated with so far?
I think I'll chime in here, and then Courtney, you can follow it up. So specifically, we don't do the exchanges, but we interviewed so many of the educators we partnered with this semester in focus groups at the end of the year, and they reported partnerships across the globe. We had one teacher who grew up in India and partnered with a school in India, so she could help share and tell her students about her growing up. We know that there were schools that partnered a lot in Central America and South America because of the time zones. So there was a lot more on this side because the scheduling of something across was maybe a little bit more challenging, but there were some, I know, positive connections across there.
Yeah, we had some, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, continue.
I was just going to add that we did have some teachers communicating with classrooms in Mexico City, and we also had some communicating with classrooms in Spain. Empatico has also been a tool that many bilingual educators have used for their English language development and for their students to practice Spanish and, for the Spanish speakers to learn English. And I would also like to add that, in the conversations that we had with educators, not only have they been communicating with children in other countries, but also in other cities within our nation. And there's also been conversation about how if the goal of Empatico is to really see similarities across differences, what are the opportunities for our educators within our own city to communicate with each other and learn from one another?
That's what I was going to add, is that it's very exciting to meet with countries and children from across the globe, and I know that sounds really exciting, but the feedback from the teachers of their classrooms, even just having these exchanges with classrooms across San Antonio, where the experiences and the perceptions are vastly different than their own, was really important and really critical. And the students were able to gain so much from that. So while we have been able to reach out to many countries around the globe, even just reaching out to the other side of our city or to other places in our own country has opened up a lot of curiosity and a lot of understanding, I think, that our students wouldn't have otherwise.
That ties in perfectly with the next question. Does a compassionate training teach educators to teach students to be kinder and tolerant with each other?
The training was basically to teach us tools and skills that we can then use with the students, whether they're elementary or middle or high school. So they're meant to be taken into the classroom, but also the actual CIT, the compassion integrity training, was for us, was for the adults. And then we are going to find ways to integrate those into our curriculum.
I think I'll add there just really quick. When we think about explicit instruction and experiences, I think we're the first ones that if we are mindful, if we practice these skills, it makes it a lot easier to then model or exhibit that behavior in our classrooms and other places as well. So some of it might be more formal and some of it is more informal, right?
And that's also the ongoing work that we have with our smaller cohorts that we're working with, is that we did a lot of learning over the summer with the training and practicing the skills and making meaning of all of the information and learning it personally to internalize the practice. But as we meet monthly with our smaller cohorts, that's something that we can address more consistently across the way too, is like, how do we move this more meaningfully into our curriculum and into our classes and with our own students and into other classrooms. So that will be part of the ongoing learning piece that we continue with.
Can I add one more thing there too as well?
Absolutely.
I was thinking about one of the teachings in the CIT, which was about ethical mindfulness, which they define as the ability to keep in mind one's identity and core values and speak and act accordingly. And so like that's something that then we practice, and you can think about across all these education institutions in all of San Antonio, how all of us are practicing our own ethical mindfulness, that how that would then translate and how we could teach that and what are your values. So I think that's a good one that connects really closely with our Empatico work.
Excellent. How can I get my child's school to participate in Trinity's program?
Well, if they're not in one of the districts that we're working with, again, as Heather had mentioned, you can go on the Empatico website and you can look and use some of the tools yourself. And there's some parent resources on there as well if you just want to do it as a parent or maybe like a homeschool group. But we are adding more districts. And so I think if you look into it online and you're not sure about any of it, just contact us and we can tell you what districts we've already worked with, obviously in year 1 and where we're going in year 2 and possibly 3. But we can definitely give you some resources to reach out to you about that.
Dr. Ellen gave the perfect advice to whoever asked that question, but I just thought I might jump in here and say thank you for asking that question on this panel. We're all parents, and so we are really excited about the work that we're doing in our classrooms, but we also really see the value in it as parents, and we're excited about how Empatico is partnering with parents. And so thank you for asking that question, and thank you for being enthusiastic about fostering these skills in your child.
Before we wrap up, would you guys like to maybe share your website address for the Department of Education at Trinity or anything else?
We have some links on our social media, which we've just rolled out. So there's not a lot of content yet, but there is links to the mayor's press release, which was the fiesta of the CIT and more about the initiative. There are links to the department. I don't know if Gabe can pull that final slide back up again. There's Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and all of our emails as well. I think that was 7. Sorry about that.
Okay, there's the screen for you guys. And that pretty much brings us to the end of our program. I want to thank today's Trinity experts for taking this time to be with us. Thank you for joining us, audience. And stay tuned for future expert series webinars by Trinity. Please visit our Trinity website at, I lost my address there, sorry. live.trinity.edu. And like I say, we try and do these every couple of weeks, and we'd love for you to keep tuning in. If you have questions for any of our experts today, please email them. With that said, have a good rest of your afternoon and have a good weekend. Thank you.